Imagine rewinding the clock to more than 2 million years ago. Africa was a land both beautiful and dangerous. Wide savannas stretched to the horizon, dotted with herds of antelope, zebras, and elephants. Towering predators prowled the grasses, lions, leopards, and the mighty saber-toothed cats. It was a world where survival was never guaranteed. And in this landscape, among the creatures of tooth and claw, lived an early human unlike any before. They were not the strongest or the fastest. They had no sharp claws, no fangs to tear through flesh, yet they carried within them a spark that would forever change the story of life on Earth. This was Homo habilis, known as the handyman, the first of our ancestors to master the art of shaping tools. With stones chipped into sharp edges, they carved out an existence and, in doing so, carved the first chapter of what it means to be human. The modern story of Homo habilis begins not millions of years ago, but in the 1960s. In the arid landscapes of Oldowan Gorge in Tanzania, the famous Leakey family Lewis, Mary, and their son Jonathan unearthed fossil remains that would change anthropology forever. The bones they discovered were puzzling. The skull fragments and teeth were unlike the ape-like Australopithecus fossils that had dominated the record until then. These remains hinted at something new: a larger brain, smaller jaws, and most importantly, hands capable of fine precision. Scattered nearby were crude stone tools, evidence that whoever left these bones was not merely a scavenger, but a maker and a thinker. Louis Leakey proposed a bold idea. This was a new species, the earliest known member of our own genus. He named it Homo habilis, the handyman. It was not just another fossil. It was a missing piece of our origin story. To picture Homo habilis is to imagine a body balanced on the edge of two worlds, part ape, part human. They stood between 1.2 and 1.4 meters tall, smaller than modern humans, yet clearly upright. Weighing between 30 and 50 kilograms, their frames were light, their chests narrow, and their legs relatively short compared to their arms. Those long arms betray their past, showing that climbing trees was still a vital part of their lives. Their faces were flatter than those of earlier hominins, with smaller teeth and jaws, as better suited for varied diets. Most striking was their brain. At 510 to 600 cubic centimeters, it was larger than Australopithecus, but still far smaller than modern humans. And yet, within that modest skull, something revolutionary was beginning. They were not just surviving, they were problem-solving. What was it like to live as Homo habilis? Life was a constant test of endurance. They were omnivores, gathering fruits, nuts, roots, and small animals. But they also relied heavily on scavenging. Carcasses left behind by lions or hyenas became opportunities. Using sharp stone flakes, they could slice meat from bone or smash open long bones to extract marrow, a calorie-rich food that other animals often ignored. This diet may have been a turning point. The energy and fat from marrow and meat likely fueled the growth of their expanding brains. In other words, their survival strategies were literally feeding their intelligence. They lived in small, cooperative groups, perhaps a dozen or so individuals. Within these groups, they shared food, protected one another, and raised their young together. These bonds may have been the foundation of the social lives that would define later humans. But dangers were everywhere. Predators could strike at any time. A moment's distraction might mean death. Homo habilis survived not by strength, but by vigilance, teamwork, and adaptability. The single greatest legacy of Homo habilis was not their bodies, but what they left behind: tools. Archaeologists have found thousands of stone artifacts associated with them, known as the Oldowan industry. At first glance, these tools may look simple: rough flakes chipped off larger stones, hammer stones used to crack bones. But in reality, they represented a revolution. With a sharp flake, Homo habilis could cut meat from a carcass, scrape hides for use as coverings, or shape wood into digging sticks. They had discovered something no animal before them had fully mastered: the ability to reshape the natural world for their own purposes. This was more than survival. This was the birth of technology. Every invention in human history, from the plow to the printing press to the smartphone, can trace its lineage back to those first chipped stones. Though innovative, Homo habilis faced challenges that threatened their existence. They were not alone in the African landscape. Other hominins, including Australopithecus and later Homo erectus, shared the same environment. Competition for resources was fierce. Where Homo habilis scavenged, others hunted. Where they gathered plants, others did the same. And all the while, predators watched closely, eager to strike. Their relatively small bodies and brains may have limited their ability to dominate. They survived through flexibility, but as the environment shifted and competition intensified, their place in the ecosystem became fragile. Around 1.9 million years ago, a new figure entered the stage: Homo erectus. Taller, stronger, and equipped with larger brains, Homo erectus embodied the next leap in human evolution. Fossils suggest that Homo habilis and Homo erectus may have coexisted for nearly 500,000 years, walking the same lands, perhaps even encountering one another. But Homo erectus had advantages. They crafted more advanced tools, mastered endurance hunting, and may have been among the first to use fire. While Homo habilis clung to the old ways, Homo erectus expanded, thrived, and eventually spread beyond Africa. By 1.4 million years ago, Homo habilis had vanished. Whether outcompeted by their stronger relatives or undone by shifting climates, they disappeared from the record. Yet their legacy lived on in the hands of those who followed. Even today, Homo habilis sparks debate among scientists. Some argue that the wide variation in fossils labeled as habilis might actually represent multiple species. Others question whether they should even belong in the genus Homo. Their small bodies and long arms resemble Australopithecus, and some suggest they were more ape-like than human. But regardless of classification, their importance is undeniable. They represent a turning point, a species that combined bipedal movement, increasing intelligence, and the deliberate crafting of tools. Why should we remember Homo habilis? Because they embody the first spark of what makes us human. They were not the strongest creatures on the savannah, but they were clever. They adapted. They learned to transform the world around them. From the first chipped stone to the satellites orbiting above us, the story of humanity is a story of tools, each one building on the last. And it all began with the handyman. The chapter of Homo habilis is not one of dominance, but of beginnings. They were the first to reach beyond instinct, to imagine possibilities hidden in stone and bone. They remind us that greatness often begins in small, fragile steps. Their disappearance was not the end, but a transition. The torch they lit would be carried forward by Homo erectus, the upright traveler who would stride out of Africa and change the face of the earth. The story of humanity is vast and complex, but every step begins with a first. And in the hands of Homo habilis, holding a simple stone flake, the journey truly began.